I'd like to introduce Mike Weber from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. He's the Deputy Executive Director for Operations for Materials, Waste, Research, State, Tribal, and Compliance Programs, long name, at the US NRC. He has more than 30 years in progressively more responsible leadership position at the NRC. He's the U.S. representative on the IAEA Commission on Safety Standards. He's the recipient of prestigious rank awards from Meritorious Executive from Presidents Clinton and Bush. And he's the recipient of NRC's Meritorious Service Award for Scientific Excellence in Protecting the Environment. And Mike is here to talk about the meeting regulatory needs. Mike.
That last picture, I didn't know if that was riding off into the sunset or the sunrise. So good afternoon. On behalf of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, I think I'm the first from NRC to greet you, and I wanted to add my welcome and also to commend the fine work of the National Council on Radiation Protection and Measurements. It's a pleasure to have you with us in Bethesda, and it's also a pleasure for us to work with the NCRP. I want to thank the NCRP for the opportunity to present before you this afternoon. I also want to thank the Council on behalf of the many federal employees whose headquarters components can actually participate in the NCRP meeting. With the reductions in travel, it's more and more difficult to support travel, to support these kind of professional activities, and so it's a real privilege for us to participate in the annual meeting. I also want to commend the Council for your close coordination and collaboration with the NRC. You are quite ably represented by your president, John Boyce. John is frequently greeting us at the NRC headquarters buildings and making your interests known to our commissioners and to other senior managers. And as one of your partners in radiation protection, the NRC significantly values the recommendations that NCRP develops. We value not just those recommendations, but also your informed opinions, and often base our regulations and regulatory guidance on the work that the Council develops. We also look forward to participating in this annual meeting. Besides just the intellectual stimulation, there's the networking and catching up with colleagues and understanding what's really happening in the radiation protection field. Now, it's a little daunting to be the last speaker in the afternoon before the Taylor lecture, so please bear with me. And as Kathy already mentioned, by this point in the day, almost every slide of mine has already been presented. So I will move quickly through some of the material that we don't need to emphasize unnecessarily. In 2014, the NRC began to transform the agency through a project that we called Project AIM. And the purpose of the project was to enhance the agency's efficiency, agility, and responsiveness in service to the nation, quite similar to the focus of this annual meeting. I'll describe the project in a bit, but first I wanted to review briefly what is driving the agency's interest in Project AIM. As we all know and experience on a daily basis, the world is experiencing an unprecedented rate of change in a variety of means through social, cultural, economic, political, technological advances around the globe. Experts in sociological change have noted that the first decade of the 21st century has experienced as much change as the last century combined. And I've even heard one estimate that the 21st century will produce about 10,000 years worth of changes at previous rates. So game-changing products are introduced almost on every few months basis instead of once every 5 years or so. Mobile devices, communication software, and other tools that we're all using today to support the demands and pace of modern society are constantly being refreshed and enhanced. And the pace of our society is constantly accelerating. And as a result, it's important for us to take stock of this changing environment, consider how these changes have implications for what we do, and for adjusting our own organizations so we can keep up with the changes. In case you doubt the pace of change, talk with our colleagues of the millennial generation, those typically seen as being born between 82 and 2000, about what life was like way back when. Before cellular communications, the internet, laptop computers, and tablets. I find often people can't fathom living in that kind of society. Besides technology and generational changes, other long-term trends and changes are reshaping our operating environment, both positive and negative, and some of those are depicted on this slide, and for the sake of time, I won't go through them all. Now, you may wonder, okay, what does all this have to do with the NRC? Well, in 2014, NRC experienced a convergence of these external changes that prompted the project. They include the impact of the lessons learned from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear accident, increase in operating nuclear power plant licensing backlog on NRC's behalf, growth in the annual fees that we impose on licensees without a commensurate improvement in the quality of service, a reduction in the demand of licensing and regulating new nuclear facilities for the reasons previously cited by my distinguished colleagues. These forces followed changes that the NRC experienced in the preceding years, with the early closure of operating nuclear power plants, a court-ordered revisiting of the waste confidence decision and the associated rulemaking, the shutdown and then the restart of Yucca Mountain repository licensing, the centralization of corporate functions, the list goes on and on. The NRC has repeatedly proven throughout its 40 years of history that we are able to deal with these significant changes. We successfully navigated change in establishing the agency, after all. We responded to the accidents at 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and more recently at Fukushima Daiichi. We've revamped our reactor oversight process. We've reinvented the materials program, strengthened security, on and on. Seen through the lens of today's environment, however, both internal and external stakeholders would say that these actions just take a little too long and cost a little too much. And this combination of external and internal factors helped the agency to crystallize the need for Project AIM. So what is Project AIM? NRC is conducting the project to improve NRC's planning, operational excellence, agility, and performance. The project team gathered perspectives from internal and external stakeholders to forecast the future workload of the agency and to identify the necessary changes to enhance the efficiency, the agility, and the responsiveness of the agency. The intent of the project was to position the agency to be more proactive or pre-responsive to circumstances that are outside of NRC's control. And after review of the Commission in early 2015 and the decision of June 2015, the staff has been diligently implementing these strategies to improve the agency's performance. Now, this slide generally depicts the process that we went through. Because we've already been through that process, I'm not going to go on at length about this. But it began with internal and external outreach to organizations such as the Conference of Radiation State Control Program Directors, the Organization of Agreement States, the Nuclear Energy Institute, the International Atomic Energy Agency, a wide variety of interested parties, and also people who have strong views on how NRC should improve its performance. Now, one of the key focuses of our recommendations to the Commission was on the development of the workforce of the NRC. And we addressed that through recommendations on strategic workforce planning to provide high confidence that we will have the employees with the right skills and talents at the right time to accomplish the agency's mission. Now, based on the work that we've conducted to date and our implementation of these strategies, we recognize that development of radiation protection professionals is one of those key strategies that's important to the success of the agency in fulfilling our mission. And we have been following with interest NCRP's development of the WARP statement, as well as the cooperation from other organizations, including the CRCPD, the Health Physics Society, OAS, and others. And close on the heels of the release of the WARP statement, the NRC conducted a technical session on human capital and health physics and other technical areas at our recent Regulatory Information Conference that John previously mentioned. This session aligned well with the observations that we've heard so far today. Terry Brock coordinated it, and it featured some of the same people we've heard today, including Richard Toohey, Jerry Hyatt, Catherine Higley, and we also had NEA, the Nuclear Energy Agency Director General, William Magwood. The question of whether the pipeline of radiation protection professionals is adequate to meet agency and national and international needs is not a new one, and I'm not going to elaborate on this because we've already heard that eloquently presented earlier today. The Health Physics Society focused on this topic numerous times, most recently in its Human Capital Crisis Task Force report, well, not most recently, but relatively recently, back in July of 2004. The task force report featured an entire chapter on the existing and projected workforce needs for state radiation protection programs. Based on the responses to a survey from state agencies, the task force estimated that the state programs employ over 1,000 radiation protection specialists and had a relatively small percentage, about 1.5% at the time, of vacancies during the conduct of the survey in 2003. The largest number of the specialists were devoted to the radioactive material regulation, as we heard Ruth McBurney previously present. About 93% of those positions were designed to be filled with individuals who had at least a 4-year radiation safety degree. Yet at the time, only about half of those positions were filled by such individuals. State agency results of the 2004 task force report were generally consistent with similar projected gaps in the other sectors of the radiation protection fields, including the energy sector, federal government, research and development, academia, and medicine. Now, we also heard Kathy present the more recent survey results of the Health Physics Society. Although the survey response rate was moderately low, the results of the survey were even more troubling than they had been a decade before, because they warned of a potential gap in radiation protection professionals in the near future. Approximately 10% of the respondents in that survey indicated that they plan to leave the health physics workforce in the next 5 years, and 51% responded that they plan to retire in the next 10 years. The survey also found that a few employment sectors are dominated by older workers who might be expected to retire within a shorter time horizon. This was particularly the case for radiation protection professionals of federal employment, about 50%, and 70% of the respondents from the state agencies who indicated a near-term intent to retire. In fact, every employment sector featured in this survey indicated greater than 30% projected retirement rates. And so that certainly heightened our attention to this. And now to this end, the NRC has been given the opportunity by the Congress to support the integrated university program for about the last decade, and that includes grants and support to academic programs to train radiation and other professionals in nuclear science and engineering and related fields. And you can find more information about that on the agency's website. Health Physics Society also had a follow-up survey in 2014 led by Stephen Bump, and those results were released in the HPS newsletter in December 2014. Again, a relatively small response rate, but the survey did show that health physics was a pretty good field to be employed in, with most, or the average salary being about $100,000 per year and a $30,000 boost for those who were certified. Projected retirements without qualified personnel waiting in the wings to replace them in state and federal agencies like the NRC can be particularly troublesome and disruptive. Throughout my career at the agency, I've observed many times how the loss of literally a handful of professionals can put in jeopardy an entire program. But a handful is far less than the projected 700 retirees that were facing the nation as part of that Health Physics Society survey. Now, as with many surveys, it's important to point out that the projections are based on a low response rate, and not all radiation protection professionals employed by state and federal agencies were included in the scope of the survey. On the other hand, the survey reflects the intent of HPS members to retire within the next 10 years and does not reflect other losses that may occur from other causes. So it tells us that we need to continue to focus on, and indeed that's what's embraced in the WARP statement, where are the radiation protection professionals going to come from? In December 2015, of course, NCRP released the WARP statement number 12, and we appreciate that. I won't go into the specifics of the statement because that should all be well familiar with us, and so I will move on, but suffice it to say that we read with interest the council statement, and we use that as input to our strategic planning and workforce development program. These results are generally confirmed by other surveys. You heard Jerry Hyatt report earlier on the survey that was conducted by the Nuclear Energy Institute, so I won't dwell on that. The same session that Jerry participated in at the Regulatory Information Conference featured the results of a survey that was conducted among regulatory agencies in the member states of the Nuclear Energy Agency, and that included 31 member countries who participate in the Nuclear Energy Agency. Director General Magwood noted that the projected growth of the nuclear industry and regulation in these fields will continue to demand an increased number of radiation protection professionals. The survey documented the shrinkage of various university programs in some countries, like our own, the United States, with a decline of 36 to 22 academic programs graduating students in health physics. Relative stability in many national programs, and in some countries, even an increase in the number of college programs graduating radiation protection professionals, including Japan going from 3 programs to 14 programs, and the United Kingdom going from 1 program to 6. Most of the survey respondents indicated a very strong negative response to the question about whether the regulatory agency in their nation would be able to hire a sufficient number of radiation protection professionals over the next 10 years. And the size of these national programs ranged from a small of about 5 to over 170, which is typical for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. In addition, survey respondents indicated concerns about newly hired radiation protection professionals not ready for work assignments, principally because they lacked the field work or the practical experience in radiation protection. So it was important for them to be supplemented in their learning and development to acquire those skills. All countries who responded were concerned that there were not enough radiation protection professionals in the pipeline. Now, as all of these surveys have shown during the last several decades in the United States and more recently overseas, there is growing concern about current and projected retirements of existing radiation protection professionals and whether those retirements will create a shortfall in qualified professionals in regulatory agencies and federal, state, and local levels, in addition to our counterparts abroad. The complexities and demands of the radiation protection professionals are forecast to increase as a result of some of those technological changes that I previously cited, as well as increased use of radioactive materials, constrained budgets, and increased expectations of elected officials and the public. In the United States and in the international regulatory framework, the principal burden of ensuring safety resides with the users of the radioactive material. So we certainly want to ensure that the private industry and the other users of those materials are suitably qualified with sufficient experience and competency in radiation protection. In addition, similar needs exist for the vendor communities, the government agencies, and in academia. And regulatory agencies also have a role to play in overseeing such use to confirm safety and security. In today's increasingly networked and interdependent environment, each of the sectors require capable and competent radiation professionals. And agencies like the NRC have increasingly adopted more risk-informed and performance-based approaches for regulating nuclear safety and security over the last several decades. And this shift also adds complexity and increased demands for expert knowledge in radiation protection, because these regulatory approaches displace the more simple and straightforward deterministic schemes. So that drives up the level of competency necessary for professionalism. NRC identified radiation protection as a core capability in the late 1990s. And as we move forward with Project AIM, NRC will be using strategic workforce planning to ensure that we hire, develop, and retain the radiation protection professionals that we need to accomplish the agency's safety and security mission. And this approach aligns well with the themes of NCRP's WARP statement, as well as other national and international strategies to ensure a healthy pool of qualified radiation protection professionals for meeting the needs of the nation and abroad. And as we proceed to attract, retain, and develop radiation protection professionals that the NRC needs, there are also some practical steps that the radiation protection community can take to sustain the pipeline of qualified individuals to meeting the nation's and the world's needs. And these steps include monitoring the availability of the professionals and projecting gaps and overages that may exist compared to national and international needs, encouraging those professionals to demonstrate agility and to broaden their competencies so that they can adjust to match shifting demands, focusing academic programs and continued education to ensure responsiveness for a range of workforce needs, emphasizing acquisition of practical experience in the beginning of and throughout the careers of our radiation protection professionals, and finally, identifying projects with right-sized or bite-sized resource demands to sustain technical and research progress while reflecting the economic constraints that we all deal with. Thank you very much.